On the flooded edges of Assam's dense forest, a young leopard cub fought quietly for its life. Monsoon rains had struck hard, turning narrow forest trails into deep brown rivers. The air smelled of wet leaves and soaked soil. What was once a familiar, playful ground had become a dangerous trap. The cub, barely a few months old, had wandered too close to the rising water while following the scent of its mother, now nowhere in sight. It had slipped down a slope, landing in thick, sticky mud near the base of an enormous fallen tree. The water had crept up fast, and now it was pinned, wedged between wood and earth, with only its soaked head and trembling ears above the surface. Its pale, fearful eyes darted in every direction, searching for help that didn't come. Its whiskers drooped, heavy with water. It tried to shift its small frame, but every movement was swallowed by the mud, holding its limbs like chains. There was no roar, no cry, only ragged breaths and the soft ripple of rain hitting the floodwater around it. In that silent moment, the jungle held its breath with the cub, a fragile life, waiting to be noticed, fighting not with claws, but with the simple will to survive. As the hours crawled by, exhaustion took hold of the young leopard's fragile body. Muscles that once held playful strength now ached with stillness. Its head drooped lower with each passing minute, barely able to rise above the cold, muddy water. Breaths came in shallow gasps, lips trembling as it tried to stay awake. The jungle around it was alive with sound, but none of it brought comfort. Just the steady hum of mosquitoes circling above its ears, the soft, endless tapping of raindrops on thick leaves, and the slow, creeping rise of floodwater licking at its throat. The weight of fear pressed down harder than the mud. It blinked slowly, eyelids heavy, eyes scanning the trees for a shape it longed to see. But its mother never came. Somewhere in the chaos of the storm, she had disappeared. Perhaps she'd been driven off, or perhaps she was searching still, unaware of how close her cub was to drowning. Either way, the cub was alone now. No pride to return to, no siblings to cry out beside, just a tiny heartbeat in the vastness of a wild, wet forest, beating slower with every moment, unheard and unseen by the world. By sheer chance, a small group of villagers had wandered into the area, gathering firewood after the storm. They moved slowly, careful with their footing on the wet ground, their arms already full of broken branches and fallen twigs. One man, walking a little ahead, paused. In the distance, something caught his eye, just barely visible between the reeds and shadows. At first, it looked like nothing more than a log, half submerged in the floodwater. Maybe debris washed in by the current, or just a trick of the light. But something didn't sit right. He stepped closer, squinting, then suddenly stopped in his tracks. What he saw made his breath catch. Two wide, glassy eyes, frightened, alert, and unmistakably alive, were staring back at him from the mud. The figure wasn't wood. It was a leopard cub. A stunned silence fell over the group. One of them dropped his bundle of firewood. Another muttered a quiet prayer. Without wasting another second, the eldest among them pulled out his phone, hands shaking slightly as he dialed. Heart pounding, he raised his voice as the call connected. "There's a leopard cub, trapped in the water near the old tree bend. It's alive! Please send help, now!" Within minutes, the call reached the nearest wildlife rescue outpost, nestled on the edge of the reserve. The moment they heard leopard cub and flood, the mood shifted. Rangers, forest guards, and a local vet moved quickly, no time for questions or hesitation. They gathered everything they might need: strong nets, heavy ropes, protective gloves, a tranquilizer kit in case the cub panicked, and a medical bag stocked with fluids, gauze, and antiseptics. No one knew what they'd be walking into. All they knew was that a life was hanging in the balance. The rain hadn't stopped. As they loaded into the rescue vehicle, fat droplets slid down the windshield, and thunder rumbled faintly in the distance. The wheels spun through thick mud and bounced hard along the narrow, overgrown paths. Each turn felt like a minute lost. Inside the truck, no one spoke much, just exchanged glances, silent with urgency. No one knew how long the cub had been trapped. Hours? A full day? The image of a helpless young leopard, surrounded by rising floodwater, weighed heavily on every heart in that truck. And as the trees blurred past the windows and the road narrowed further, one thought pressed in. Time was running out. When the rescue team arrived at the scene, what they saw stopped them cold. The leopard cub was still trapped, its frail body barely visible above the murky water, its head resting weakly against the side of the tree trunk. Its eyes, once wide with fear, were now dull and glassy. Every breath looked like a struggle. The jungle had gone quiet, as if the forest itself was watching. The rangers acted quickly, but carefully. One of them, wearing tall rubber boots and a rain-soaked uniform, stepped down into the flooded pit. His voice was low and steady as he spoke to the cub, not words the animal could understand, but tones meant to calm. "Easy now. We've got you," he murmured. Behind him, another rescuer knelt at the edge, unraveling a soft, padded rope loop. It was the kind designed not to tighten too hard, not to harm, only to help. The cub didn't thrash. It didn't growl. It simply shivered, too exhausted to resist. The ranger gently moved through the water, each step sinking deep into the thick mud. It clung to the cub's small limbs like glue, refusing to let go. Slowly, he slid the loop beneath the cub's chest, careful not to put pressure on its ribs. The rope was steady. The ranger gave a signal, and they began to pull, inch by inch. The mud groaned and tugged, sucking at the cub's frail frame as though it wanted to keep it. But the team didn't stop. With hands shaking from effort and hearts racing with hope, they fought the earth's grip with gentle determination. With one last careful tug, the cub's frail body broke free from the grip of the mud. The ranger held it gently, cradling it as he carried it through the water, and laid it softly on a waiting tarp. Its legs hung limp, barely able to twitch. Its sides rose and fell with quick, shallow breaths, each one a small battle. The cub's fur was soaked, its whiskers drooping, its tiny chest coated in grime. Without wasting a moment, the team sprang into action. One ranger carefully wrapped a thick wool blanket around the cub to preserve what little warmth it still had. Another reached for the portable heating pad they had brought just in case, placing it beneath the animal's side. The crate was lined with straw to cushion its body, and they gently lowered it inside, padding the edges so it wouldn't roll or slip on the bumpy road ahead. There was no celebration, no high fives, just quiet urgency. As the doors to the rescue vehicle closed, the team took their seats. The ride back to the wildlife center was silent, except for the hum of tires over wet earth and the soft sound of the cub's breathing. No one dared to speak. Every eye flicked toward the small, blanketed form in the crate. Every heart hoped they weren't too late. At the Wildlife Rescue Center in Kaziranga, the team had been preparing since the call came in. Blankets were warmed. Fluids were ready. As soon as the vehicle pulled in, the doors flew open, and the crate was carried inside with care. The cub was rushed into a quiet, softly lit treatment room, away from noise and other animals. A vet gently lifted its small body and placed it on a padded table, while two assistants stood by. The situation was critical. The cub was severely dehydrated, its gums pale, its breathing shallow. Mud still clung to its fur, its paws, even around its tiny nose. Its body trembled from cold and exhaustion, and its eyes were barely able to focus. A warm towel was draped over its back, as IV fluids were quickly inserted into a front leg. One vet checked its temperature. It was dangerously low. Another carefully wiped the crusted mud from around its eyes, using a damp cloth. Dirt was gently cleared from its nostrils so it could breathe easier. Through it all, the cub didn't growl, didn't resist. It didn't even flinch at the needle. It simply blinked slowly, as if trying to stay awake just a little longer. Even in pain, it seemed to understand. It was finally somewhere safe. Over the next few days, the cub stayed in a quiet, climate-controlled enclosure tucked deep inside the rescue facility. The room was dim, calm, and warm, designed for recovery, not stimulation. A heat lamp glowed gently above his bedding, casting soft light on his still body. He slept most of the time, curled into a small bundle of spotted fur, as his body began to recover from shock. The staff moved carefully around him, never raising their voices or making sudden movements. Every few hours, a ranger or vet would enter, kneel beside him, and offer warm broth with a dropper. At first, he barely opened his eyes. But slowly, day by day, he began to respond. His ears twitched, his tail flicked weakly, and eventually, he began to drink the broth on his own. They watched these small signs with quiet hope. Each day, when someone entered the enclosure, the cub would lift his head just a little higher, eyes blinking in recognition. That pale, haunting blue in his gaze never left them. And so they gave him a name, Neel, for the soft, ghost-like color of his eyes the day they found him. It was a name born from pain, but carried with it the first threads of healing. Weeks passed, and Neel continued to grow stronger with each quiet sunrise. His steps, once wobbly and uncertain, became more stable as he began pacing the edges of his enclosure. Though he still moved slowly, every lap was a victory, a quiet reminder of how far he had come. His body, once soaked and caked in mud, now carried a healthy glow. His fur had regained its natural luster, soft and golden, catching the light as he stretched in the morning sun. The rangers took turns calling his name, watching closely. Each time, Neel would raise his head, his pale blue eyes meeting theirs for a brief moment. He no longer flinched. He no longer looked for an escape. There was still caution in him, but the terror that once lived behind his gaze had started to fade. Veterinarians observed his progress and began discussing the next phase, rehabilitation. It would take time, patience, and space for Neel to learn how to survive again in the wild. But for the first time since he had been pulled from the flood, there was hope. If he continued to heal, the forests of Assam might once again echo with his quiet steps, not as a helpless cub, but as a young leopard reclaiming the life he nearly lost. The story of Neel quickly spread across Assam and beyond. A single photo, his mud-caked face barely visible above the floodwaters, those pale, frightened eyes staring out, captured hearts across the region. It was shared on local news, wildlife pages, and rescue forums, drawing attention from people who had never before heard of the quiet forests where he had nearly drowned. Comments poured in. Some thanked the rangers, others asked how they could help. Neel became something more than just a rescued cub. He became a symbol, a reminder that even in forgotten corners of the world, life is fragile and worth fighting for. His rescue showed how one moment of courage, one phone call, one act of kindness can tip the balance between life and loss. For many, Neel represented hope. For the rangers and villagers who had helped save him, he was proof that even the smallest effort, made in time, can change a life forever. Dear friend, thank you for following Neel's journey. If this story moved you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel to support more animal rescues and stories of hope.